Chapter 37, The Girl Who Wore My Face. Time skip back of the shop. Alisa leaned against the wall after she told Monroe about the events in DC with Katie Forbes, the Winter Soldier, Hydra, and other things. Mind control, Monroe had said earlier, packing like he was trying to physically outrun the concept. You're telling me they can just flip a switch and someone becomes, what, a weapon? Alisa exhales slowly, eyes dropping to the worn wooden floor. They don't flip a switch, she mutters, voice low. They build it piece by piece until there's nothing left to flip back. She thinks about Katie, then Caroline, as she knows that Caroline is still upset on not finding her. Monroe noticed she spaced out and he taps her shoulder to bring her back. Hey. Alisa looks over to him. You did that thing again, he says. Her brow furrows slightly. What thing? You go quiet, he replies. Like too quiet. Alisa looks away. I'm thinking. Yeah, Monroe says gently. That's the problem. That almost gets a smile out of her. Almost. Silence settles between them again, heavier this time. Monroe shifts his weight, more serious now. This Hydra thing. They're gone, right? You said S.H.I.E.L.D. took them down. Alisa lets out a breath that isn't quite a laugh. S.H.I.E.L.D. was Hydra. That lands hard. Monroe blinks. I'm sorry, what? Infiltrated, decades ago, she says, eyes distant. Everything they built, compromised, people we trusted gone. She looks at the wall. Some of them didn't even know. Monroe's expression tightens, processing that. And the soldier, he asks carefully, the one you mentioned. Alisa didn't answer, as she looks over to Steve, who is talking to Rosalie. He's not the enemy, she says finally. Not really. Monroe watches her closely, but he's dangerous. Yeah, she says without hesitation. So is Katie. Monroe exhales slowly, running a hand through his hair. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. I don't like any of this. Alisa huffs softly. Join the club. Then Monroe tilts his head slightly, studying her. You're different. Her eyes flick back to him. What? Since you got back, he says, you're sharper, edgier. He gestures vaguely. More. I've seen some things and now I'm questioning humanity than usual. Alice's lips twitch faintly. Usually, she repeats. Monroe looks at her. You know what I mean. She does. Her gaze drops again, quieter now. It's not just Hydra, she says. It's what they can do, what they already did. Her fingers curl slightly. People don't just disappear, Monroe, she continues. They get rewritten. Her voice lowers. Memories, loyalties, identity, and they don't even know it. The words hang in the air. Monroe doesn't joke this time. He doesn't deflect, instead he just nods slowly. Okay, he says. Yeah, that's officially worse than anything I was imagining. Alisa looks over to Monroe before her phone rings, and she grabs her phone, and she looks confused before stepping outside to answer. Time skip outside. Hello, she says on the phone. Sean Renard's voice comes through. Alisa. She straightens slightly, instinct kicking in before anything else. Sean. A pause, not long but long enough. Her brow furrows as she knows that something's wrong. You all right? She asks, already scanning the street out of habit cars, reflections, movement in windows. Steve's not far, but this feels separate. Sean exhales quietly on the other end, controlled, measured, but she knows him well enough to hear what's under it. I need you to listen carefully, he says. Her posture shifts instantly, alert, grounded, grim instincts humming low. I am. Another pause. Then he speaks. While you were in the hospital. Everything in her stills. Her grip on the phone tightens slightly. What about it? Her voice lowers. Sean doesn't soften it. I had a visitor. That's not possible, Alisa says flatly. S.H.I.E.L.D. had the floor locked down. After DC, after Hydra, there's no way someone just. It wasn't S.H.I.E.L.D., Sean cuts in. That lands heavier. Alisa's eyes narrow slightly, her gaze unfocusing as she starts pulling pieces together. Then who? Sean doesn't answer immediately. And that's when her stomach drops because Sean Renard is not a man who hesitates without reason. When he speaks again, his voice is quieter and more precise. Someone who looked exactly like you. Alisa lets out a slow breath through her nose, but her pulse has already picked up. No. Sean continues, voice steady but edged now. She walked into my office like she belonged there. No hesitation, no fear. Alisa's jaw tightens slightly. What did she do? She stood there and let me look at her, Sean says. Didn't rush it, like she was testing how long it would take. That sends something cold down her spine. Not fear and instinct. Predator recognizing predator. I called her you, Sean continues. She answered to it. Alisa's grip tightens. Of course she did. She had your voice, he adds. Your posture, your habits, almost. Alisa's eyes narrow further. What gave her away? Sean doesn't hesitate this time. She held back. Alisa knows that when a Wesson looks at a Grimm, their pupils goes all back. Alisa exhales slowly. Yeah. Sean continues, voice quieter now but sharper. I asked her to look at me, her eyes, shifted but not fully. Alisa's expression hardens. She said Monroe overreacted, Sean adds. That pulls a scoff out of her, sharp and humorless. Yeah, no, he didn't. Exactly. A brief silence passes between them, heavier now. What else? Alisa asks. Sean's tone shifts slightly, more deliberate. I asked her to say my name. That makes Alisa pause, and... She said it, he replies, but not like you. Another thing that doesn't need explaining. Alisa's voice drops slightly. So, you called her out. I did, she didn't deny it. Of course she didn't. Alisa looks out at the street, but she's not seeing it anymore. What did she call herself? Sean answers without hesitation. Katherine. That name settles in her chest like something familiar and unwelcome. Her jaw tightens. Yeah, she mutters, that tracks. Sean continues. She said I should be grateful she was the one standing there instead of what's coming next. That makes Alisa go still again, because that's not just a message. That's a warning or a promise. What else? She asks quietly. She wanted to see how I'd react, Sean says. Specifically, how I'd react to you being threatened. Alisa exhales slowly, piecing it together. Testing you. Alisa does another humorless laugh. That doppelganger bitch really loves a test. Sean comes through again. She also made it very clear she wasn't the one who put you in that hospital. Alisa's eyes flicker slightly at that. Not trust but noted. Of course she did. Another silence stretches. Then Sean adds, she left on her own terms. Alisa's grip on the phone tightens slightly before easing again. She's setting something up, she says. Agreed, Sean adds, quieter. She knew exactly what she was doing. Alisa lets out a slow breath. Yeah, she says, that's kind of her thing. Then her voice shifts colder now, more focused. She wanted you to tell me. Alisa's eyes flick over to Steve, as she thinks that Steve will tell the difference between her and Katherine, as Sean says. Yes. I'll handle it, she says. Sean's voice comes through again. I figured you would, but be careful, Alisa. She huffs quietly, but there's no humor in it. When am I not? Sean doesn't answer that. Because they both know the answer. She pulls the phone away but pauses. Sean. Yeah. If she comes back. She doesn't finish it. Doesn't need to. Sean answers anyway. I won't mistake her for you, you know what I am. A flicker of something approval maybe passes through her. Good. She hangs up. The street comes back into focus. The world resumes. But something's shifted. Because now Katherine Pierce isn't just a ghost from another life. She walked into Sean's office, looked him in the eye, and made her move. Chapter 38, Vintage Captain America. Time skip, 1st October. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Portland didn't pour, it lingered. Steve stood near the kitchen counter, drying a plate with far more focus than necessary, his brows slightly furrowed like he was trying to solve a tactical problem instead of dishware. From the couch, Alisa watched him over the rim of her coffee mug. There was a slow, dangerous kind of smile forming. "You're going to hate this month," she said casually. Steve glanced over. "That sounds like a threat." "It's not a threat," she hummed. "It's a promise." He set the plate down. "All right, what am I missing?" Alisa leaned forward, elbows on her knees, eyes gleaming. "Halloween." Steve blinked once. "We had Halloween," he said. "Kids dressed up went door to door." Alisa laughed. Not a polite laugh. A "you have no idea" laugh. "Oh no," she said, shaking her head. No, that was baby Halloween." Steve frowned slightly. "There are levels. There are entire ecosystems, Steve." She stood, walking over to him slowly, circling once like she was inspecting him. "You," she said, pointing at him, "are prime material." "For what?" "For a costume." Steve crossed his arms. "I'm not wearing anything ridiculous." Alice's smile widened instantly. "Oh, you're absolutely wearing something ridiculous. I fought in a war. And now you'll fight suburban children for candy. Character growth." Steve stared at her. "I don't think that's equivalent." She leaned in slightly, voice dropping just enough to be dangerous. "Do you trust me?" That was the problem. He did. Steve exhaled slowly. "That depends. On. How embarrassing is this going to be?" Alisa grinned. "Very." Time skip, 31st October, Halloween night. The street was alive. Porch lights glowing, pumpkins flickering, laughter echoing between houses as kids ran past in costumes, their voices overlapping in excited chaos. Steve stood at the edge of the sidewalk, questioning everything. He looked down at himself again. The star is crooked. That's intentional. My shield is plastic. You're welcome. These boots squeak. Alisa shrugged. Adds personality. Steve stared at her. This isn't historically accurate. It's emotionally accurate. That doesn't make any sense. It makes perfect sense. You're vintage. I'm not vintage. You're from the 40s, Steve. That's vintage. He exhaled slowly. This feels like a setup. It is a setup. Steve narrowed his eyes. You planned this. Obviously. He glanced at her. Dressed in all black, clean lines, sharp edges, boots that actually worked. The kind of outfit that looked effortless but absolutely wasn't. You didn't even try. Alisa raised a brow. I did. That's just what you wear. Exactly. That's not a costume. She tilted her head slightly. I'm a Grimm, Steve. This is method acting. That's not what method acting is. Agree to disagree. A group of kids ran past them before one slowed down, staring at Steve. Are you Captain America? Steve hesitated. Alisa nudged him, subtle but firm. Careful, she murmured. Public image. Steve glanced at her, then back at the kid. He straightened just slightly. Yeah, he said. Yeah, I am. The kid lit up instantly. That's so cool. They ran off. Steve watched them go. Quiet. Alisa watched him. See, she said. Steve huffed a breath, something softer slipping through. It's still a bad costume. It's a great costume. The shield is plastic. You're emotionally attached to it already. I am not. You noticed the star was crooked. That's different. She smirked. Sure it is. Steve glanced down one more time. The crooked star. The slightly too bright colors. The squeaky boots. Then back at the street, kids laughing, running, believing. I'm not wearing this next year. Alisa smiled instantly. Oh, you absolutely are. Steve closed his eyes briefly. That wasn't a suggestion, was it? Not even a little. Chapter 39, Thanksgiving. Time skip, Home, 1st November. Alisa is in another room talking to Alina as Steve is drawing. Alina's voice comes through. "Come on, Alisa, you know Bonnie wants you here for Thanksgiving." Alisa sighs as she looks over to Steve. Okay, we'll come, but Stefan's gonna hate this," acting like he doesn't know him. Alina stops talking for a moment as she remembers the story Stefan told her before she answers. He would, and he's going to be there. Alisa leans against the wall as she thinks to herself, and she murmurs, "If Steve going to be in his life again, I think he should know who Stefan is." Alina on her end looks over to Stefan, who is talking to Damon. Let's hope he's okay with that. Time skip, next week, Mystic Falls. After arriving last week, Alisa walks over to Forbes' house and she knocks on. Caroline opens the door and she smiles. "Alisa, hi." Alisa hesitates, which Caroline notices as her smile disappears. Alisa sighs to herself. "Can I talk to you?" Caroline nods. "Of course." She allows Alisa inside, and she makes them a cup of tea before they sat down in the living room. Alisa takes a sip of her tea before looking over to Caroline. "Care, I know you've been searching for her ever since the 90s, but..." Caroline looks at her confused. Alisa hesitates before telling her, "I saw your sister, Katie, when me and Steve were on the run from Hydra." Caroline's face slowly drops. "What?" Alisa puts the cup down and holds Caroline's hand. "I saw her, Care. She tries her best to remember you when you were a child." Caroline removes her hand as denial slowly builds up. No, that's not possible. I've been looking for her. I checked everywhere. Every lead, every rumor. Nothing, no body, no trace." Alisa looks at her. "I know." Caroline stands up abruptly and to pace fast. "No, if she was alive, I would have found her. I should have." Her breathing starts to pick up as her hands run through her hair. "I didn't stop looking, Alisa. I didn't just move on. I didn't forget her." Alisa slowly stands up. "I know you didn't." That stops Caroline, not fully but enough. Caroline turns back to her slowly as her eyes are glossy. "Then how?" Alisa swallows slightly as she choosing her words carefully. "They changed her, Care." Caroline looks at her as Alisa continues. "They call it the Red Room. Hydra's tied into it. They take girls and train them, break them, rebuild them into something else." Alisa hesitates again before telling her. "She didn't recognize me. Not really." Caroline's lips part slightly as Alisa continues. "She looked at people like she was sorting them, deciding." Caroline shakes her head again, slower this time. "No." Alisa leans forward slightly. "But when Natasha, when someone she trusts pulled her back." Caroline's eyes flicker at that word. Back. Alisa continues. "It was like something fought through it." Caroline doesn't move. Alisa continues, quieter now. "She said your name without saying it." Caroline's breath catches. "What do you mean?" Alisa's voice softens. "She didn't say Caroline, but you were there." Alisa looks back at Caroline. She hesitated. Caroline's eyes fill instantly. "She what?" "She hesitated, Care." Alisa's voice is firm now. "She was supposed to move, to attack, to follow orders, and she didn't, not straight away." Caroline's hand slowly comes up to her mouth. Her whole body stills. "Katie." It comes out like a whisper. Like she's afraid to say it too loud in case it breaks. Alisa nods gently. She's still in there. Caroline shakes her head again, but this time, it's different. Not denial. Overwhelm. Emotion hitting all at once. She used to. Her voice breaks. She used to hate losing. A small, broken laugh slips out. She'd chase me around the garden for hours just to prove she wasn't slow. Her eyes shut tightly. Tears fall now. I told her I'd always be there. I told her I'd protect her. Her voice cracks harder this time. And I didn't. I wasn't. Alisa stands quickly, closing the distance and pulling her into a hug. You didn't fail her. Caroline grips onto her instantly. Tightly. Like she might fall apart if she doesn't. She's alive, Caroline whispers. Alisa nods softly against her. She's alive. Caroline pulls back slightly, eyes red but burning now. Different energy, not broken but focused. Where is she? Time skip, Gilbert's house, Thanksgiving, 26th November. Alisa woke up in her old bed, and she looks at Steve again, who is peacefully sleeping, and she smiles before waking him up by kissing his lips. Steve stirs slightly from the kiss. MMM. Alisa teases him. Rise and shine, sleepyhead. Steve doesn't open his eyes right away. Instead, his hand moves instinctively, finding her waist, pulling her just slightly closer. 5 more minutes, he murmurs, voice rough with sleep. Alisa lets out a soft laugh. Nope, not happening. He finally cracks one eye open, squinting at the light. You're serious? Alisa looks at him. Very. Steve groans quietly, dropping his head back into the pillow for a second like he's considering ignoring her completely. Pretty sure it's illegal to be this awake this early, he mutters. Alisa raises an eyebrow. It's Thanksgiving. That doesn't make it better. She shifts slightly, propping herself up on one arm as she looks down at him. You're in my old room, she points out. You don't get to complain. Steve glances around then, properly taking it in for the first time in the daylight. The room. The details. The pieces of her past, still sitting quietly where they've always been. His expression softens a little. Yeah, he says quietly. Guess I don't. There's a small pause. Then his gaze flicks back to her. A faint smile tugs at his lips. Still think I should get 5 more minutes, though. Alisa leans down again, but this time quicker, and kisses him again, just to shut him up. It works, for about 2 seconds. That's cheating, Steve murmurs when she pulls back. She grins. It's effective. His hand shifts, pulling her down with him this time, not letting her get away so easily. Alisa lets out a quiet laugh as she lands lightly against him, bracing herself against his chest. Steve. 5 minutes, he repeats, softer this time, his forehead brushing hers. There's something different in his voice now. Less teasing. More wanting the moment. Alisa pauses. Just for a second. Then her expression softens again. Okay, she whispers. But neither of them actually goes back to sleep. They just stay there, close and quiet, letting the warmth of the morning and each other settle in before the chaos of the day begins. After a moment, Alisa exhales softly. You ready for this? She asks. Steve lets out a quiet breath, a small smile forming. With your friends, the vampires, the witch. He glances at her. Yeah, I think I've fought worse. Alisa huffs a laugh. You say that now. Steve smirks slightly. You're on my side, I'll survive. She shakes her head, but she's smiling. Come on, Captain America, she says, finally pushing herself up and off him. Let's see if you can handle Thanksgiving. Steve watches her for a second as she gets out of bed, then sits up with a quiet exhale. I've handled worse, he mutters again. But there's a hint of a smile there. Because somehow this doesn't feel like a battle. It feels like something he didn't think he'd get. Time skip, Bonnie's house, Thanksgiving evening. The dining table had been extended with 2 extra leaves to accommodate the sheer number of people packed into Bonnie's dining room. It was a sprawling, beautiful mess of cultures and histories. Bonnie's Swiss-born American traditions, creamy Elpler-Magronin and golden Zopf, sat side by side with the Salvator brothers' Italian feast of agnolotti and slow-simmered Sunday gravy. The noise was constant. The clinking of silverware against china competed with the overlapping conversations of vampires, witches, a werewolf, and a super soldier. All right, everyone, quiet down, Caroline announced, tapping her spoon against her glass. It's time for the tradition. We go around the table and say what we're thankful for. No skipping and no sarcasm, Damon. Damon, who was mid-pour of a very expensive bottle of wine, rolled his eyes. I'm thankful for bourbon and the fact that Stefan didn't overcook the pasta. Next. Alina nudged him with her elbow before smiling at the group. I'm thankful for family. The ones we were born with and the ones we found along the way. Having Alisa back home, it makes the house feel full again. Bonnie went next, her hand resting briefly on her grandmother's old tablecloth. I'm thankful for the strength of this group. We've been through a lot of darkness, but we're still standing. When it reached Steve, the table went strangely quiet. He looked around at the faces, most of them decades younger than him in appearance, yet carrying burdens he recognized all too well. He looked at Alisa, who was watching him with a soft, encouraging smile. I'm thankful for second chances, Steve said, his voice steady and sincere. For a long time, I thought the world I knew was just gone, but being here, seeing a town that looks after its own, and being welcomed into a home like this, it means more than I can put into words. Jeremy cleared his throat, trying to break the heavy emotional tension. I'm thankful that Captain America is actually a cool guy and doesn't mind me asking a million questions. The table erupted into light laughter. As the meal continued, the conversation turned into a chaotic debate about football, town history, and Damon's constant attempts to steal the last of the Swiss bread. Across the table, Stefan caught Alisa's eye. He looked at Steve, then back to her, nodding slowly. The tension that had been in his shoulders all day finally seemed to ease. He leaned forward, catching Steve's attention during a lull in the noise. Steve, Stefan said quietly, after dinner I'd like to show you something, some old records from the town archives, from the 1940s. I think you'll find them interesting. Steve's eyes sharpened with curiosity. I'd like that, Stefan, thank you. Outside, the autumn wind rustled the leaves against the windows of Bonnie's house. But inside, the air was warm and smelled of rosemary, garlic, and melted cheese. For the first time in a long time, the supernatural magnet of Mystic Falls wasn't pulling in danger. It was just holding a family together. Time skip later. The Thanksgiving dinner had wound down into a comfortable, sleepy lull. The heavy plates were cleared, leaving only the scent of Bonnie's Swiss tart and the Salvator's wine in the air. While Damon was busy showing Jeremy how to pour a proper drink, and Alina was laughing with Alisa in the kitchen, Stefan caught Steve's eye. The archives I mentioned, Stefan said, standing up. They're in the study, I think you should see them. Steve followed him. The study was quiet, lined with old books and the faint scent of parchment. Stefan didn't head for the bookshelf, though. He turned to face Steve, his expression uncharacteristically heavy. Alisa thinks you should know the truth, Stefan began, his voice barely a whisper. And she's right. I've spent a long time hiding because I thought it was safer for you. Steve tilted his head, confused. Safer? Stefan, we only met a few hours ago. Stefan stepped closer, his eyes suddenly intensifying. The familiar vampire veins didn't appear. Instead, his gaze became focused, a deep, hypnotic pull that Steve felt in the center of his chest. I didn't meet you today, Steve, Stefan said. Time skip, the compulsion. Stefan's pupils dilated, catching the lamplight. He used a flicker of his power, not to control Steve, but to unlock the doors Stefan himself had slammed shut decades ago. Remember the World Exposition, Stefan commanded softly. 1943, Queens, New York. Remember the smell of the popcorn, the neon lights of the Tomorrow Pavilion, and the boy who wouldn't stop trying to enlist. Suddenly, the room blurred for Steve. The quiet study in Mystic Falls vanished, replaced by the roar of a crowd and the booming voice of Howard Stark. Time skipped, the memory unlocked. Steve felt the ghost of a thinner, frailer body. He felt the cold air of New York biting through a jacket that was too big for him. He saw Bucky, vivid, real. Bucky was grinning, telling him he was the last eligible man in New York. I'd settle for just one, Steve heard his own younger voice say. Then the memory shifted. He was standing by the enlistment booth, the weight of the argument with Bucky pressing on his chest. Don't do anything stupid until I get back. But there was someone else. In the periphery of his vision, back in 1943, a man had been standing near the shadows of the Stark booth. a man with dark hair and a look of profound, ancient sadness. As Steve looked at Bucky walking away toward the dancing girls, he turned and caught that man's eyes. "Good luck, Steve," the man had said back then. His voice had been a calm anchor in the middle of the chaotic fair. Steve blinked, and the man in the 1940s suit shifted, merging with the man standing in front of him now. Time skip present day. Steve gasped, his hand flying out to grip the edge of the mahogany desk to steady himself. The rush of the memory was like a physical blow. He looked up at Stefan, his blue eyes wide with shock and a sudden, sharp recognition. "The fair," Steve breathed, his voice trembling. "You were there, at the World Exposition. You spoke to me before I went into the back room with Dr. Erskine." Stefan nodded slowly, the hypnotic trance fading from his eyes. "I watched you, Steve. I saw the way you looked at Bucky. I saw the way you refused to give up on a war that everyone told you that you weren't big enough to fight." Steve stepped forward, searching Stefan's face. "Why didn't you say anything? Why make me forget?" "Because you were becoming a symbol," Stefan explained quietly. "The world needed Captain America to be human, not someone associated with people like me. I didn't want my darkness to touch the light you were trying to bring to the world, so I walked away. And I made sure you didn't remember the stranger who wished you luck." Steve let out a long, shaky breath. He looked at his hands, then back at Stefan. The loneliness of being a man out of time felt just a little bit lighter. "You're not a stranger," Steve said firmly. "You're the first person I've met since I woke up who actually knew me before the serum, before the shield." A small, genuine smile touched Stefan's lips. "I knew the kid from Brooklyn who didn't like bullies." Steve reached out and gripped Stefan's shoulder, a silent thank you passing between them. The secret was out, and for the first time in 80 years, the two men from a forgotten era truly saw each other.